Well, DSF is here. I wanted to talk about a book that I just read and what I'm studying. I'm pretty much studying the 1930s. I'm going to go back and study the 1920s, and I'm doing this from like economics, but I'm also doing this from a political viewpoint, and because I wanted to understand kind of how we got to where we were, and I had to back it up until about right where the Great Depression kind of started, and I'll get into this here in a minute. Um, and the book I just read is by Dr. Burton Folsom Jr. from Hillsdale College. Very good videos out there on YouTube here if you want to see it. But it's New Deal or Raw Deal, How FDR's Economic Legacy Has Damaged America. And what first got me into FDR looking at him was a conversation of gold. And, then I went on from there. But it's very interesting. We have actually, FDR took some of the policies of Hoover, and Hoover had some bad policies. And but FDR expanded on these bad policies and made his own policies that were even worse, and we'll get into some of this. Now, a lot of people think the stock market crash in 1929 started the Depression, and that's false, big time false. What happened was in May of 1929, stock market crash wasn't until October. The Smoot-Hawley Tariff was passed in the House of Representatives. And what this is basically it's a tariff on any goods coming into the States to make them higher than what the goods are inside the United States. So basically limiting trade. And what other countries did was they blocked trade coming in. So we couldn't sell agriculture, we couldn't sell cars. We were basically our automobiles were stymied. Everything was basically stopped with this Smoot-Hawley Tariff. And what this did was help a few people at the cost of everybody. And this is a theme in government programs that I've noticed. But this was under Hoover. And Hoover ended up passing this in 1930, 6 months into the new year. So in a way, the stock market crash, it happened, but if you had hindsight, you could see that the Smoot-Hawley Tariff happened, and then maybe that was the beginning of that. But so the Smoot-Hawley Tariff was one thing that you can look at. Now let's look at another thing with the Great Depression. And that is when the Smoot-Hawley Tariff happened, many at that time from World War I, they owed the U.S. money. They were debtors to the U.S. And they decided not to pay, or they couldn't pay. They just stopped payment to the U.S. So we, as the U.S., we from the World War I debts weren't coming in. So we had a tariff that's blocking trade, and now we have people not paying us. Third is the Federal Reserve. And one thing I want to mention was in 1907 crash, J.P. Morgan was the lender of last resort. He pretty much saved the country in 1907 because there was no liquidity and he provided it. So in 1913 they created the Fed, and that was supposed to be the lender of last resort. And in the beginning of the Great Depression and during the Great Depression and stuff, the Fed didn't provide that liquidity. So that's another reason of the Great Depression. And then finally, Hoover raised taxes. Under Coolidge, the tax rate was 24%. And he raised it up into the 60s, I think it was. And the thing was, if you ever look at the Laffer curve, there's a certain point where the government can maximize revenue if your point is to maximize revenue. But then there's a certain point where you can get a lot of revenue and you can maximize growth. And Coolidge pretty much, with Andrew Mellon as his Secretary of Treasury, they maximized that growth and they got a lot of revenue. And what Hoover did was he went on the other side of the curve, and then Roosevelt even went farther down the curve with higher taxes. So that's one. Those were some of the reasons why the Great Depression started and why it prolonged so long. And the other one was government spending, and this started under Hoover as well. So we had the tariff under Hoover, we had government spending under Hoover. Oh, and also excise taxes, guys. These are the taxes like on cigarettes, liquor, gasoline, anything that you could think of. They started as a one-year emergency measure under Hoover. They were supposed to be 1 year, that's it, we'll take them out. Well, Roosevelt extended them a year more, and now we pay excise taxes on everything. This is the most regressive tax. It hits the poor people harder. And nowadays we don't even think of that as a tax raise or loss. So they've already pulled one over on everybody that, you know, these excise taxes are just ridiculous. There shouldn't be any excise taxes, you know, unless it's an emergency, like they said. And I don't even think an emergency. There should be no. But they've already pulled this over and they've passed it. And a few years into his thing, in this book I'm reading, Roosevelt said that we can just keep them permanent. So excise taxes is another thing that took money out of the economy. And a lot of times, guys, so Hoover, he started the agricultural board, you know, because farmers were struggling because they couldn't sell no more to free trade. And Roosevelt gets elected by saying that he'll lower taxes, balance the budget, blah, blah, all the stuff that we, you know, that should be done. But I haven't gotten to Calvin Coolidge yet, guys. I'm going to read his book, but basically stuff that Calvin Coolidge did, by what I've learned through watching different documentaries and stuff, Roosevelt said he was going to do. He was going to lower taxes, balance the budget, and he basically did none of this. He got in and he said, this is an emergency situation. People have got to eat, and, you know, I'm going to spend. And the problem with this thinking is that if the government doesn't come in on a crisis, everyone goes hungry. I'm going to put it this way. When you raise prices of everything to maybe feed a few people, you're actually starving more people. And the thing is, there's no way the government was going, you know, the numbers is like, you know, with this unemployment, or it might give money out and stuff. There's no way that is going to match how many people may not even go to the government, or people that, you know, have all these excise taxes and everything getting raised that ends up costing people more money to buy goods, and they go hungry. So it's kind of like a fallacy to think that you can just give people money and raise prices and they'll be less hungry. And a lot of people went hungry during this period through 1930, 32, all the way to 39. One of the worst programs under Roosevelt was his agricultural program, where he actually paid farmers to stop producing. And the reason was supply and demand of the prices. If we have less supply, the prices will go up for farmers, and that's good, but the prices would go up for everybody trying to eat, making more people hungry. Makes no sense. But the organization had inspectors that would go and make sure farmers didn't do this, and the farmers would get the money. Well, the farmers were still bribing the inspectors and using the land. So the inspectors had to have inspectors to watch the inspectors to watch the farmers. This didn't work, so the Roosevelt administration used spy planes to make sure that the inspectors were watching the inspectors that were watching the farmers weren't growing the crops. You see how ridiculous it gets when you start trying to do supply and demand as a central planning? It doesn't work. Another thing was the WPA. Now, we all hear about Roosevelt and the New Deal, how many schools they built, hospitals, or whatever. And the thing is this, guys, if you're not building the schools where they need to be built, or you're not building the stuff where that needs to be built, you're really not building stuff that's going to benefit the society. And this is the problem. A lot of, for instance, the most money in the 1935 going into 36, because the election of 36 was, most of the money was going into the state of Pennsylvania only, because it was the biggest swing state that needed to be won. So the bottom line is, you can say, yeah, I built 500 schools, but if it all went to one state, you're not helping. It sounds good that you did this, but it's not really helping the overall, the resources, the capital, exploring the capital where it had to go, it didn't work right. So guys, the other things that I'm looking at when I was reading this book with Roosevelt was, so we got the WPA. He also had a lot of programs that were, by the Supreme Court, that were dubbed unconstitutional. For instance, they try to implement price controls where, like a dry cleaner, everybody had to spend 40 cents to get a shirt dry cleaned. Even if the guy down the street that wasn't on the main street wanted to do it for 35 cents, he would get thrown in jail because he wasn't listening to the price controls. And you could see how this is definitely unconstitutional, and it was. But it was part of, Roosevelt was mad because this didn't go through. Also, after the 1936 election, he had an idea to expand the Supreme Court to put his own people in so he could pass these kind of laws. And the Supreme Court, or actually some other Democrats in the Senate and the House, ended up blocking this. And one reason was because Roosevelt was trying to get his own people into different parts of the Democratic Party, and it made other Democrats mad. So I don't know if they were really doing it just to block him, but they ended up doing a good thing. But it might have been because they were more mad that they had one guy trying to dictate like who was going to win the races or run and stuff. So yeah, guys, this book is very interesting. It also shows that the 1930s pretty much started this big era of progressive government where nowadays it really doesn't matter if it's Republican or Democrat. You had George Bush, the first, throwing tons of money at education. Throwing money is fine, but unless the results are happening, it doesn't really work. Then you had George Bush the second, or younger Bush, expanding Medicare and giving the seniors what they want for votes. Not saying that, like the seniors in Medicaid, they don't need the money, but thing is, was that the most efficient way to spend people's money? Also under Roosevelt, guys, now that I'm thinking of it while I'm talking here, Social Security was started. And we all say that, yeah, maybe Social Security is a great idea, it helps the elderly, but the program wasn't even made for this, guys. People's average age until they would die was 60 years old. And Social Security, when it was first introduced, was, hey, we'll start giving you the benefit at 62, knowing that most people wouldn't even qualify, but they would have to pay. So you see, guys, like, it wasn't really to help the elderly. they were just, most elderly people weren't going to be around to accept it. So that's the thing. I think most, even nowadays, it's not really, I mean, nowadays we've outlived the benefit, so it isn't working how it was supposed to. You probably have to raise the benefit back for it to work. But the thing is, it's not really even a benefit. It's just, and it was supposed to be 1% of people's income, the maximum of $30 a month or a year. And now I think it's up to 8% of people's income. And it's a benefit you might not even get. It's just, I don't know, there's a lot of things. Minimum wage was started under Roosevelt. All these programs, unions, the Wagner Act, I think, with the unions was started under Roosevelt. Yeah, this book is very interesting. It's eye-opening. It's like I said, Roosevelt was really bad. He took a lot of things that Hoover did wrong and went on with them. So we have to say, but the end of the book is pretty interesting. We talk about why did the Great Depression end? And Roosevelt died during World War II. And, Roosevelt had this idea of the second Bill of Rights. Like everybody, you have the right to your own, to a job, like a good job, a good house, and all this stuff that really, it has to be earned in hard work or education or smarts or something like that. He was thinking this was a right to people. When they're not rights, they have to be provided by somebody else that's not a right. And when he went down, Truman was president, or he became president. And Truman and some other people in the Congress, they actually lowered taxes and incentivized business. So when the soldiers came back, you can see that it was really a breakthrough going back to the lower taxes, expanded business and growth for the economy, less government spending, and you can see that we're out of the Great Depression finally. So it's very good. It's eye-opening because a lot of people, they just learned that FDR was a great president. And, I mean, I think he might be the worst president that we had. And there's a few that are really close to him. Now, I'm going to be studying more of the 1920s. Actually, there's another book I'm going to read of Folsom and his wife. It's FDR during the war, and that is called, one second, guys. Yeah, FDR Goes to War, and how the federal power and stuff during that time. And then I'm going to try to read Coolidge's book, Calvin Coolidge, during the 1920s. Why were the 20s prosperous? So these are books I'll probably share with you guys. I'm going to write something in my blog, a little more detail maybe of the different programs that I think were good or bad during, or not good or bad, but just really reshaped America into a different kind of philosophy that maybe we didn't even need. All right, guys, it's a long video. Thanks for watching. DSF, take it easy.